Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining this Center on Great Teachers and Leaders webinar. This is Lynn Holdheide, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. We're very excited that you were able to make time in your busy calendars to join us, and are confident that the next 60 minutes will be a good use of your time. Our goal in this webinar is, at the end, to have added some resources to your toolbox of technical assistance to help serve your states and districts concerning their educator evaluation training needs. But before we begin, I wanted to give you a little bit of notes about the logistics of the webinar. You will note that you are all muted. We know, as you all know, it's sometimes difficult to have phones unmuted because a lot of times you hear background noise. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. We encourage your discussion and questions and comments via the chat box at the right-hand side of your screen. You can pose any questions at any point in time during the webinar, and we will be sure to respond. If you have questions for any of the panelists today, you can pose them in the chat box, and I will pose them to them later on during the question and answer time. If you have any questions concerning any technical assistance questions that you have in terms of logging on or getting information or how to participate in the chat box, you can either include those in the chat box or you can email those to Whitney Graves, and you can see her email address on the slide here. We do have polling questions that we're going to be using throughout the webinar. You'll be able to participate in those when they're showing up on the screen, and those also will be on the right-hand side. We'll give you a few more instructions on those in the first polling question. We also hope that you're able to attend the webinar for the full 60 minutes. As you know, at the end of the webinar, we would love to get your feedback and on the webinar, participating in a survey, so that way we can improve our webinars in the future. And lastly, we will be recording this webinar. I know many have responded to us letting us know that they were not able to participate today, but would love to have a link to the archive webinar. We will be making those available. So if you want to share those with your colleagues and let them know about these resources that we're about to preview, you can do so. So with that, we're going to start with the important information. What are we going to accomplish today? What we're hoping to accomplish is that we're able to introduce to you some new and somewhat old resources that we have developed around our professional learning module. We want to increase, primarily our goal is to increase the Regional Comprehensive Center's awareness of what these PLMs are and how they can be used to support states. And then ultimately to talk through a little bit about how these resources can be used and customized for the state and district levels to have a lot of utility for our stakeholders. In order to do that, I am accompanied by several of my GTL Center colleagues, Ellen Cushing and Megan Zephyrin, who will be reviewing the professional learning modules and giving you an idea of what they consist of. We are also pleased to be joined by Marie Mancuso, who is the Associate Director for the West Comprehensive Center, and Carolyn Everidge-Fry, who is Assistant Director for the Office of Educator, Equity, and Talent at the Ohio Department of Education. We've asked both of these ladies to join us to tell us a little bit about how they've used the professional learning modules and give us some insights into their utility in meeting their stakeholder needs. Marie from a perspective from the state, and then Carolyn giving us an idea of how the professional learning modules can be used and customized for district-level context within their state. And with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Ellen.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. I'm just going to wait and, okay, I'm becoming the presenter. Okay. So these next slides are intended to give you an overview of the professional learning modules as a whole, as well as some information on how you can access the modules from our website. The PLMs are designed as day-long train-the-trainer sessions that are focused on specific educator quality topics. Typically, the train-the-trainer sessions include GTL Center staff conducting a workshop with regional center staff to deepen their knowledge on a specific topic. Once trained, the regional center staff then work with their states and conduct a training that is customized to their particular context. If requested, the GTL Center can serve as a co-facilitator at the state training, and we also provide any additional support as needed. The topics for the PLMs are identified based on a review of our needs in the field, which are determined through a review of our technical assistance requests, as well as conversations with regional centers, states, and other stakeholders in the field. To date, we've developed 3 PLMs, the first using evaluation data to inform professional learning, another on creating coherence, connecting teacher evaluation and professional supports to the Common Core, and our third is the Introduction to Student Learning Objectives. The modules are designed to provide a national picture on the topic that they address, and they also walk participants through a series of activities that help build their knowledge and expertise on the topic. The modules are also intended to be customizable for both regional centers and for SEAs. So each of the PLMs include a standard set of materials. It includes a slide presentation, a facilitator's guide that provides an overview of the module, including the activities and the timing of the activities, any preparation work that should be completed, as well as a script for the presenters to follow as they walk through the PowerPoint. The modules also include all of the handouts and activities that are used in the trainings, and any additional resources or materials that are referenced in the trainings. So to access the PLMs, you can go to the GTL Center website, which is www.gtlcenter.org. And if you go on the top row, there is a tab called Technical Assistance. When you hover over that tab, a drop-down list appears, and you can select Professional Learning Modules as one of the options from that list. When you click on the Professional Learning Module option, it'll take you to the PLM homepage, and at the top of the page is some information on the purposes of the modules, some contact information, and then just general guidance on their use. When you select one of the specific PLMs, you'll be redirected to a new page that houses all of the materials for the PLM. So once you get to the specific PLM webpage, in this case it's the Introduction to Student Learning Objectives webpage, you can access all of the materials. And the materials are all in PDF format except for the PowerPoint presentations. If, however, you would like a Word version of the materials, you can request them through the GTL Center email address. So before we go into the content of what each of these PLMs contain, I believe that we have our first polling question. So in just a moment, oh, there you go. On the right-hand side, you have the polling question. And the question is, what is the best way to make Regional Center and SEA staff aware of the PLM modules and the customization or modification services that the GTL Center can provide? And the response options include broadcast email announcements, direct email from GTL staff, other colleagues, an announcement on the GTL website homepage, or other. We'll leave the poll open just a little bit longer while everyone submits their response. Okay, if we can close down the poll. So it looks like most people prefer to have a broadcast email announcement followed by some direct emailing from GTL staff. We also have several unanswered, so maybe for the next polling questions we can just, maybe we'll leave it open a little bit longer so people can decide what the best response is. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the first PLM, which is the Introduction to Student Learning Objectives. And this module is designed to provide a high-level overview of the national landscape of states and districts that are using SLOs in their teacher evaluation system. Now, SLOs are a new measure in teacher evaluation systems, and we know that states and districts are implementing SLOs in a variety of ways. And these different implementation approaches range from requiring different components in an SLO to establishing SLO business rules. And so the main objective of this module is to share how leading states and districts are implementing SLOs, and to do that in a way that promotes a common understanding and a common language around SLOs. The final objective of this module is to really help build regional center capacity to support their SEA stakeholders who are either considering or are already implementing SLOs. So this next slide provides an example of some of the content and activities that's addressed in this module. During the training, we walk participants through the SLO evaluation cycle, or the set of steps that happen throughout the school year. During this discussion, we provide examples of how this process looks in different states and districts. At this point in the training, participants really focus on steps 1 and 2, where they can choose an SLO template, which is the form that an SLO is written on, as well as an accompanying SLO checklist, or the content that's required to be included in an SLO. Participants then review a sample SLO that has been developed and use that checklist to review the content of the SLO. Participants can see what kind of information is included. They can identify information that should be incorporated, and then just provide some general feedback to strengthen the quality of the SLO. Once participants have developed a solid understanding of what is included in an SLO, so the information that's included in an SLO, they have the opportunity to write their own using some mock data that we provide. The purpose of both of these activities is to really help participants develop a solid understanding of what an actual SLO looks like, so that the SLO vocabulary and the processes make sense to them. These activities also show participants the many ways that SLOs and SLO processes can be implemented. We then continue from this activity to walk participants through the rest of the evaluation cycle and discuss the roles of teachers and evaluators during these different steps. Throughout the training, one of the main issues that we discuss are the different implementation approaches taken by states and districts, and what to consider when making decisions and implications of those decisions on the SLO process. So this next slide is one of those activities where we walk participants through the implications of their decisions while also using real-life examples from the field. So this slide represents one of the most significant variation in SLO approaches, which is the spectrum between teacher agency or teacher autonomy and SLO comparability. SLOs are, on the left-hand side of this spectrum, you'll see what we're calling type 1, or an approach that allows a lot of teacher discretion in how their SLO is developed. And on the right-hand side is what we're calling type 4, where there is a high level of SLO comparability, but low teacher agency. At this point in SLO implementation, we really don't have much research that says which approach on this spectrum is the best approach, and each has its benefits and drawbacks. But the idea of this type of activity is to lead a facilitated discussion with SEA staff who really are charged with developing their state SLO guidance and requirements, and to help them understand the implications of those decisions. Whether SEAs are aware of it or not, they are making decisions that impact SLO comparability and teacher autonomy, and we think that it's really important for staff to understand the implications of these decisions. We also, as I mentioned before, ground these types in real-life examples so that people that are participating in this training can research those sites on their own if they're interested in learning more about these specific approaches. The SLO Professional Learning Module was released in the summer of 2013, and so we've had the great opportunity of working with and training 7 of our Regional Center colleagues on this module. As mentioned in the overview, the purpose of this module is to really provide regional centers with the national landscape of SLOs so that they have the background and the knowledge and the language and the resources to support their stakeholders who are either implementing or considering the implementation of SLOs. In addition to working with our 7 regional centers, we've also worked with 6 state education agencies. So in situations where the regional center has been trained on the module and a state within that regional center has requested some training, we've co-facilitated the training with our regional center colleagues. And during this co-facilitation, we've been able to customize the module to make it reflect the state's current SLO status. So for example, if a state is already implementing SLOs, when we go through this module, we would use that state-specific SLO template and checklist. We've also worked with states and regional centers to customize the module as a whole and create a state-specific training. For example, we worked with 1 state and 1 regional center to pull together some slides and some resources from the GTL Professional Learning Module and incorporated some additional slides from a state-developed module or webinar and created a new training. So this work was done during a day-long meeting, and the end result was a new online resource that districts could access and use to train their teachers and principals on SLOs. So now I'm going to transfer it over to Megan, who's going to be talking about another module that we've created.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be talking about a module called Creating Coherence. And as Ellen and Lynn alluded to, we really get ideas about kind of what the needs are from the field. And this particular professional learning module came out of conversations with practitioners in the field on the need for some systems alignment between 3 primary reforms that are taking place. So we're all familiar with Common Core state standards, as well as reforming teacher evaluation systems, and of course professional learning, and how these 3 initiatives connect for educators in the field. So in October, this brief was published, and it really kind of talks about the path that's needed to take a process that really needs to happen to align and make connections between these three pieces to give the teachers the skills they need to help students master the Common Core state standards. And as we know, as these evaluation systems roll out, we want to make sure that they're more than just evaluation systems, but support systems that are providing developmental guidance for educators as they're learning about the new standards. And the process that we've really designed here through Creating Coherence is a shared journey where learning is done by the learner, and we're building ownership collaboratively. That's kind of the basis for this particular process. And I'll walk you through the process in just a minute, but I want to quickly just talk about the outcomes of this particular professional learning module. And so we want to make sure that we have a shared language for this systems alignment work. And we actually have created core instructional practices, which I'll address in just a minute, to help us kind of have this shared language. So we all have the same understanding of what it means to be implementing Common Core state standards. we also want to make sure we're strengthening connections between these three pieces so that it's not feeling like another thing added to the list of initiatives that are coming down from administration in school districts. And the purpose isn't to rewrite or rework anything, but really to find the connections and integrate them into things that are already existing. And then the last outcome is really to help districts and states identify gaps in support for teachers' instruction. So thinking about where is it that teachers need the most support and being really strategic about how to differentiate that and thinking about next steps to address the gaps. So as I alluded to earlier, it's a four-step process. And the first step is really, it's a very interactive professional learning module. The work is really done by the participants. There's a little bit of kind of pre-work done that introduces what we call the core instructional practices in step one to really make sure everybody's has the same understanding of what these instructional shifts are for teachers to be making so that students are able to meet the Common Core state standards. And so we talk a little bit about the core instructional practices and how they were developed, and it was a collaborative process that was done through AIR as well as looking at other groups' work, Student Achievement Partners, International Reading Association, University of Michigan, curriculum experts, teacher educators, assessment developers, a really broad range of folks weighed in on these core instructional practices. And there were 10 developed for the ELA standards and 10 developed for the mathematical standards. And while they are content specific, there are some that are universal, skills that are practices that teachers of all subjects and grade levels should be able to demonstrate in their practice to help students kind of across the board be demonstrating the new standards. So those 20 core instructional practices are kind of highlighted at the beginning of this particular professional learning module discussed and kind of identified how they link to the Common Core state standards. But one thing that we also like to make really clear about the core instructional practices is that this is not another list of standards for teachers to use or a checklist, one-size-fits-all strategies or approach to this. These were really crafted for the purpose of bridging the work between teacher evaluation and the Common Core state standards. So these are really for the purposes of this alignment work and not kind of as something that we should be putting under teachers and saying, here, now you've got to do this too. Something we like to clarify with folks. And then once everybody kind of has this shared understanding with the core instructional practices, we then move into step 2, which is really about looking at their observation tools. So whether they use, Charlotte Danielson's framework or Marzano or a homegrown tool, the materials on the professional learning module are kind of framework or tool agnostic so that folks can really look at those connections clearly and, of course, make it meaningful to their specific context. And we know that most observation tools are pretty generic, so they're looking at these core instructional practices across not just in English language arts and mathematics, but kind of across the observation tool and how this may impact teachers of all subjects and grade levels. And so really during this process, they're asked to look for explicit and implicit connections, and in a minute I'll show you kind of how this looks in the workbook that we use to do this work. But it really starts to help them identify whether or not the tool they're using is aligned to these practices that the Common Core state standards are sort of asking teachers to have in order for students to be able to meet them. And then once we have a sense of the observation tool, we actually then start walking folks through their professional learning. And of course, we think of professional learning broader than just professional development. What kinds of supports do they have in place? And we want to make sure that the professional learning that they have is coherent, authentic, and job embedded. And so we're helping them kind of think a little strategically about what that might look like and where there are some opportunities for refinement. And then finally in step 4, there's really kind of 2 outcomes to step 4, or to this 4-step process, and they kind of come out in step 4. That is, the first one is, does our rubric need some enhancement? Does this teacher observation tool need some enhancement to make sure that it's really got some of these core instructional practices embedded in it? And the second outcome could be the professional learning. There's some opportunities there for some integration and connections for teachers between what the expectations are of their observation tool and what the instructional expectations are based on the Common Core standards. So step 4 is really thinking about what are the next steps. Is it either to revise the tool, or is it to think about the professional learning piece? So the last piece I'm going to share with you, just to kind of demonstrate the process and what this looks like, and give you kind of a glimpse, a taste of what these core instructional practices look like. I have a sample here on the slide. This is really a page out of the workbook that's used, and there's the mathematics core instructional practice number 5. It's listed here on the left-hand side. And as you read this, you'll probably notice that this isn't really specific to mathematics instruction. I mean, this is a practice that we want to see all teachers be able to do. And so as you move kind of across this tool, you'll see in the middle, this is the step 2 I talked about earlier around let's look at the observation tool and the explicit and implicit connections. So where are some of the connections that really call out this practice in the tool? And then in the last column there, they think about their professional learning, their initiatives, the offerings, the programs and supports. Think about what they have available to address this particular instructional practice. Once they've had a chance to kind of go through this, and this particular page is provided then for all 20 of the core instructional practices. So you can imagine this is a day-long activity, and where folks are really working through this. And then they can think about the questions for consideration at the bottom. So how does their framework or their observation tool align? And then who has the skills and how many people have the skills to implement these practices in their districts? And then, of course, how aligned are the professional learning opportunities to this particular core instructional practice? So then at the very end of the day, once they've worked through all of the instructional practices, they then kind of have a summary of where are there some gaps so that they can start thinking about planning. So maybe their gaps are in, we have a lot of implicit connections and not a lot of explicit connections in our framework. So we want to think about what does it look like to enhance that. Or perhaps we have a lot of explicit connections and our focus is really going to be on professional learning and how we start to help teachers see the connections between their professional learning and the expectations that are highlighted in their teacher evaluation observation tool. So the session is really it's sanctioned time, essentially, for districts or states to come together and kind of work through this and think about this. We have so far worked with the state of Idaho. We're just starting to work with Connecticut. We are doing lots of work in Arizona, and we also have shared this process in sort of a shortened form at an AFT conference with a variety of districts. We actually have Marie Mancuso to share sort of some of the experiences and how this process has worked for Arizona now.
Thank you, Megan and Ellen. Marie, we're now going to hear from our good colleague and friend, Marie, as to how she has used one of these PLMs in her region. Marie?
Thank you, Lynn and Megan. This is Marie, and I'm going to talk about how we use this module in Arizona. So the West Comprehensive Center has been working with Arizona on the development and implementation of their evaluation system for the last couple of years, and particularly in the last year or year and a half, Arizona has really recognized, the Arizona Department of Education has really recognized the need to intentionally make connections between the Common Core standards and their educator evaluation system. They recognize that in many cases the field is feeling very overwhelmed, and the perception in the field is that they're dealing with multiple initiatives that are separate and happening simultaneously. And one of the realizations that ADE came to was that they were really reinforcing this idea or this perception by offering training on parallel tracks. So the Standards Division was offering lots of training and support on the implementation of the Common Core. The Educator Evaluation Team was doing a lot of training and offering support to districts on the Educator Evaluation System. And so they were really looking for ways to integrate their support efforts so that the field could see the strength and the opportunity in looking at these as complementary, and through observation and feedback there would be a mechanism to support the implementation of the Common Core. So one additional challenge that Arizona faced was their districts in Arizona are using a variety of observation instruments. So although the state is using the Danielson framework in their state model, districts have a choice to use any instrument that they choose at the local level. So although many districts are using the Danielson framework, there are also many districts that are using Marzano or using Strong or have some variation of those in a homegrown model. So it was really important for Arizona to consider how are we going to address alignment in observation tools when we have a variety of tools being used. So the Center's release of the Coherence Module was both timely and relevant for Arizona. And in the fall, this past fall, when the brief was released, our center, we shared that with leadership at the Arizona Department of Education, and they were very interested in looking into it further and considering how they might use it to address the need in their state. So I'll talk a little bit about how our center, in partnership with the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders, tailored the introduction and rollout of this process to Arizona's context. So after the brief was introduced to the ADE leadership team, which was in the fall, our next step was to plan a webinar with Arizona's leadership team. The leadership team is made up of, they really serve as an advisory group, and they're made up of, in addition to ADE staff from the Standards and Educator Evaluation divisions, the team is made up of representatives from the Arizona School Administrators Association, the Arizona Educators Association, the Charter School Association, and three districts are represented, or the field is represented through a superintendent, an associate superintendent, and a principal from districts across Arizona. So we scheduled a webinar in December for this team, and it was an overview and an introduction to this process, and they decided at that session that the three districts who were represented there wanted to go through the training themselves, and based on the outcome of that, then plan to present this module, this process, at a summit, a statewide summit that Arizona was planning in February. So the training was held in January. The three districts brought teams. They went through the process. It was a full day. ADE staff were there as well as the Charter School Association. And it was followed. We talked about what they learned about their own observation instrument, their own learning, professional learning plans, etc. We talked about what they were going to do next, what benefit this, how useful or relevant this was for them. Those are the kinds of things we kind of processed through at the end of the training and the end of the process. And then the following month, just actually Sunday and Monday, the two-day Arizona State Summit was held. There were 380 representatives from across the state in LEA teams. This was the fifth in a series of summits that Arizona has sponsored. This one was specifically targeting supports that instructional leaders need to integrate the Common Core with educator evaluation. This module, this process, was one of the breakout sessions, and it was standing room only, which I think is evidence of the high level of interest and need of the districts out there in terms of addressing this alignment issue. And as a result of that work and that rollout over the last several months, I think Arizona is well positioned to move this effort forward. The awareness now is there. The level of interest has been heightened. I think the recognition of the need to do this alignment work is there. And so our next steps is to work with the Arizona Department of Education in partnership with Great Teachers and Leaders to go back with ADE and the Charter School Association and the Arizona School Administrators Association leadership to design a training that's very customized to Arizona. I don't anticipate that we're going to do a lot of adjustment or modification of the module itself other than perhaps customizing some terminology. For example, Arizona doesn't refer to their standards as Common Core. They call them the Arizona College and Career Ready Standards. So just, common terminology that we use in Arizona, as well as hopefully making some connections between the previous trainings that the Arizona Standards and Evaluation team has done and this module so that participants can see that this is really kind of the next step in integration. So in terms of our next steps as a center, in addition to working with Arizona to offer this training to districts, is we hold regional meetings with our states around educator evaluation. And at our next one, I am going to ask Arizona to share the work that they're doing with Utah and Nevada, the other two districts, the other two states in our region, to share the work that they're doing, because I know this is something that would be of interest to Utah and Nevada based on where they are in the implementation of their evaluation system. And I think for other comprehensive centers around the country who are working with states who are also tackling this challenge of aligning these initiatives and aligning particularly the implementation of Common Core with observation and feedback loops in an evaluation system, I think to introduce or suggest this module as a means to get that work started or even to enhance the work that they're already doing in this effort, it could be really beneficial. I know Arizona is not the only state, that's grappling with how best to support districts in making these connections.
So thank you, Marie. This is Lynn. And as you all can see, our partnership with Marie and the West Central Regional Center has really helped move this work forward. And really, it's been a great partnership with the Arizona Department as well, because with all of our modules, we pilot them. And they have been able to give us incredible feedback throughout the process. So we feel like this has been a very good partnership for all of us around the table. So we're to the next polling question that we are going to show here in just a minute. But before I do that, just please be reminded that if you have any questions for Marie or Megan or Ellen, to post them via the chat box, and we can get those responded to. So our next question, after you've had an opportunity to listen a little bit about what the PLMs are, how they can be utilized, and then some specific example from Marie and how they were utilized in Arizona, why don't you get your feedback in terms of how you would envision in your role using the PLMs in your state or in your region. And you see some options there. You could pilot it with a small group. We've done that in a couple of situations in which we wanted to get some exposure and interest in this work. We've had them used from regional center perspectives to share across states. We'll hear a little bit from Ohio in a moment about how it can be used to target support for districts across the state and how they can be customized, or how you can use them in working sessions at conferences, or we've also gone in and actually provided training just exclusively for regional center staff and our SEA staff. So if you would take a moment and participate in the poll to your right, and select all of the ones that you feel might be a good way to utilize these modules as you've learned about them. And just in the interest of time, Ellen, I am going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to you, and you can give a little bit of an overview around the evaluation data module that we just had come out, and we'll close the poll after that time, and we can review the results then.
Okay.
Ellen?
Sounds good. So this is the third professional learning module that we would like to highlight today. It's titled Using Evaluation Data to Inform Professional Learning. And this professional learning module provides some resources and tools that support principals and district staff who make decisions around the collection of teacher evaluation data, and offers a framework to think through how to use that evaluation data to inform professional learning. So the module starts by defining the big ideas and stating some assumptions about professional learning, and then goes into a discussion about the best way that teacher evaluation data can be used for professional learning purposes. The module finally discusses some school and district structures, some challenges, and then also some opportunities for supporting teacher evaluation and professional learning processes. So this graphic represents the cycle of evaluation data use and is the main framework that we use throughout the module to identify those connections between data use and professional learning. So across the country, we know that there are states and districts that have developed similar evaluation cycles that include these three steps. And while the language and the breakdown of the steps might be a little bit different, we consider these the basic buckets for the data use evaluation cycle. So a key step in this module is ensuring that everyone is using the same language and has a shared sense of assumptions about what we mean by evaluation data and professional learning. So for example, in the module, when we're talking about reflection and goal setting opportunities, we said at the beginning of the module that we really are referring to self-assessment or teacher-developed goal setting, for example. Within this graphic, the orange arrows indicate opportunities where teachers and evaluators are actually gathering that evaluation data and analyzing it so that they can use it to either inform the teacher self-reflection or to help inform the professional conversations that happen between the teacher and the evaluator. So in order to establish that common language, we have participants really share their own evaluation terminology and their own understanding of professional learning. So the module introduces participants to many activities that are designed to get them thinking about their specific context and their experiences. So these next slides highlight some of the activities, it's not all of the activities, but some of the activities that participants engage in during the module. So this first activity starts with a graphic explaining what a common definition of effective professional learning. So throughout the training, participants are really encouraged to think about professional learning that's focused, active, and collaborative, as well as to identify professional opportunities that are ongoing, job-embedded, and differentiated for teachers. So during this activity, participants are given a chart paper, and they are asked as a team to list out the different professional development opportunities that they offer. And so once this list has been generated, the teams then identify the components of effective professional learning within those professional development opportunities. So in most cases, when going through this activity, the teams recognize that most of the professional development is the more traditional sit-and-get activities, rather than some of the opportunities that really promote genuine teacher growth. So this is another activity for participants. Prior to engaging in this, they are actually, there's a large group discussion about what are the characteristics of high-quality feedback from an evaluator. And so some of these characteristics that we discuss as a group include tying the evidence to specific teaching standards, or providing feedback that is timely and frequent, detailed and evidence-based, as well as constructive or question-driven as opposed to just critical feedback. And so when participants start this activity, they have a handout that discusses each of those characteristics, and they use that handout to take notes on the formative feedback discussion that they watched through this video. And the purpose of this activity is to help the participants think about, to further ground their experience of receiving formative feedback. So what does that good, high-quality feedback sound like? And then how to use that information in a way that can promote professional growth. So this is another activity that's actually repeated throughout the module. And it's a way to contextualize the professional learning and data use experience for the participants in the room. And so what this is, it really encourages the participants to think about the structural, the cultural, technical, and fiscal conditions and resources, really, that need to be in place in order to develop these high-quality professional learning environments. And so as participants think about what is needed to use evaluation data in the self-reflection piece, the formative evaluation piece, and the summative evaluation stage, the module facilitators, so the folks that are facilitating the module, capture those conditions that the participants identify, and at the end of the day, use what's been established throughout the conversation to help inform some next steps or some planning for the participants so that they know where they can start making some changes into those cultural, structural, technical, and fiscal conditions. So this is the final activity that we're highlighting for this professional learning module. And what it does is it highlights some real-life examples of different districts, schools, and national programs that have really made a concerted effort to integrate their evaluation data into professional learning decisions. And so on the left-hand side are the instructions for the activity that the participants receive, and then they work in their teams to review the examples that are provided in handout 6, and they write down their thoughts and comments on that handout. And so the activity, the facilitator works with the folks that are looking at these examples to really help think through what examples might work in their specific context, as well as identify any additional information that they would like to receive. So as we were developing this professional learning module, we were working very closely with the Great Lakes Comprehensive Center and our colleagues at the Ohio Department of Education to make sure that this module really met the needs of the field. And so we were lucky enough to work with Ohio and specifically Carol and Everett Fry in developing and piloting this module. And so Carolyn's going to talk a little bit more about how Ohio plans to use this module in the future and about the development process as a whole.
This is the first year for full implementation for teacher and principal evaluation in Ohio. And while most districts spent the past summer and fall working to identify which student growth measures their district would use, educating their staff on those growth measures, including SLOs, and becoming familiar with our electronic system for reporting evaluation data, the state agency was looking toward the spring when the teachers and principals would have the results of the evaluations. Because Ohio law requires the evaluation system to provide for professional development, to accelerate and continue teacher growth, and also to provide support to poorly performing teachers, the professional development piece has been on our radar as a state agency. The administrators in the state know they must provide this professional development for their staff, but many of them have obviously been so busy trying to learn all they can about the new evaluation system and trying to implement it that they haven't had an opportunity to stop and plan for the required professional development or to realize how important the evaluation data will be in making those decisions. So this module will be very useful for the administrators in the state as they wrap up the teacher evaluations this May, and that's why we as a state agency were excited to have the opportunity to work with GTL on this professional learning module. GTL asked us to review a draft of the learning module in the beginning and provide input and thoughts, which were graciously considered. We then agreed to pilot the learning module with a group of stakeholders in Ohio, with GTL staff presenting the module. Our pilot group included members from our state elementary and secondary principal associations, the Superintendent Association for the state, higher ed, state agency staff, our state trainers in OTES, the Ohio Teacher Evaluation System, and our state trainers for student growth measures, which are the ESCs, our Regional Educational Service Center staff. We chose these individuals to participate in the pilot because we knew they would provide solid feedback because they would be looking forward to the opportunity to use the final product with their constituents and would therefore want a solid product. Because this particular learning module was just released, this week we just started working with our regional center to Ohioize the module. In other words, we want to ensure we use the evaluation terms that the educators in Ohio have become familiar with over the last 2 years in order to avoid any confusion and also to ensure they see the connections to their work and their daily activities. The members of our pilot group also felt that this was an essential aspect that we needed to address before we released the module in the state. So, for instance, where the module states summative evaluation data, which is referencing the combination of the performance and the student growth data, in Ohio we call that the final summative evaluation. Although the change is minor, we still just want it to be accurate. Another example, one of the sample handouts shows a teacher's sample pre-assessment. So we plan to redo that using Ohio's template for the pre-assessment so it looks familiar to the teachers and the principals as they go through the module. So basically we just want to ensure everything aligns to Ohio's evaluation system before we push it out to the field. All of the individuals in the pilot group that participated thought the materials would be excellent for use with district administrators and other leaders in the locals. They believe the activities and the materials to be on target for focusing the district on their evaluation data, learning how to interpret that data, and then how to make informed decisions on using the evaluation data to shape the future professional development of individuals in the district as well as for an entire building or for the district. So once we have inserted our Ohio terminology, we plan to push the learning module out to the field through our regional educational service centers, who will likely use it to work directly with their local administrators in the field. And we also have a weekly communication that our state agency sends out to the locals, and we plan to advertise the release of the Ohio version once we've made the changes through that communication when it's ready.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. What a great example of a way that you're able to customize these materials. And I think when Ellen was talking earlier, we talked about them being available in Word document so that you can easily take these and customize those. So hopefully, Carolyn, you have found that to be a useful exercise and save quite a bit of time on your end.
Absolutely. It's been very helpful.
Well, thank you. We are moving along fairly quickly to the end of our time here. I did want to, I think Whitney is going to be displaying the polling results from the last question here in a moment, which we'll review. But as she's getting ready to do that, I was hoping that, Megan, you could go ahead and review what we have in terms of upcoming PLM.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lynn. So you know how in education all of our deadlines are yesterday? Well, at the GTL Center, apparently all of our deadlines are last year. But please ignore the 2013 and use that as 2014 dates on this particular slide. So you can see we've got 3 professional learning modules coming up this year, social and emotional learning and teacher self-assessment tool, evaluator and evaluation training, and teaching conditions. So look for those in March of 2014, April of 2014, and May of 2014.
Wonderful, thank you. And we are very much looking forward to releasing these. And I'm just looking at the polling results from the question that we asked a few moments ago, and it looks like most individuals feel like customizing them for their state context or for their districts seems like the most appropriate way to use these. And I'm really happy to hear that, because when we contemplated the design of these and figuring that out, we really wanted to make sure that they could be customizable. As Carolyn mentioned earlier, just making reference to specific context within a state brings a long way. It takes you a long way in terms of really making the connections within your state. So that's definitely the design that we sought for. And we have also worked with regional centers in a couple of states, actually, in helping in customizing those for the state context. So that's certainly something that we are interested in doing. I'm hoping that we can go to our next polling question, which is actually something we value your opinion on in terms of when you're thinking about your stakeholder needs, whether it be your state or your districts that you're working with, what are some additional professional learning module topics that we should consider at the center? We are very interested in keeping on this line of work. We obviously will be consistently looking at our technical assistance requests that come in and information that we hear from the field, but would love your feedback here in terms of, you know, what type of modules we should consider going forward. So you'll see on the right-hand side, you have a listing of ideas and that we have put forward, and if you wouldn't mind submitting those in the poll, and if you have other items, you can submit those in the chat box if we didn't have those listed in the options that you see on the screen here. So we're almost to the end. Just a couple of notes I wanted to point out in regards to the comments from Carolyn and Marie. I think that's what's really critically important here as we develop resources for the states and the districts that we serve, is that we're really listening to what's going to be practical, what can be used. I was really thrilled in the conference that Marie mentioned before with Arizona. It just so happened that Charlotte Danielson was also there presenting, and she was able to attend the session that Megan overviewed, the PLM for our Coherence, and was very excited and was really starting to make connections to the Danielson framework as well. So we're really hoping that these can be very practical and that they can be picked up and used by states and districts to really help move the work forward, whether it be SLOs or Coherence or whether it be about data use. We're finding that we get a lot of questions in the field related to those. So Whitney, I don't know if everyone's participated, but let's go ahead and close that poll so we can see what type of results we got before we close out for the day. So looking at information around developing principal evaluation systems, that doesn't surprise me, as well as designing systems to approach system improvement, all areas of which we get a lot of technical assistance around, and hopefully we'll be able to provide some guidance in those as well. So this brings us to the top of the hour, and I don't see any questions that have come up through the chat box, but if you have questions, please feel free to contact us. You are able to, we'll show you a link. There's links that are readily available for you to go in and look at each of these professional learning modules that we've had the opportunity to review. If you would like to use these with your states or with your districts, or you have questions about those, please feel free to contact us through the email address that's listed here. So again, we thank you for your time that you provided for us within the last 60 minutes. Hopefully you have found it valuable and you feel like these resources can be of value to you in serving your stakeholders. As we close out for the day, I wanted to thank Marie and Carolyn and Megan and Ellen for their time in putting this together and really helping us think through how to develop these so that they can be very, very practical for use in the field. As we close out, we will have a survey, link to a survey monkey, where we would welcome your feedback on this webinar and any additional insights that you might have on new PLMs that we might consider. Thank you very much, and enjoy your afternoon.